Welcome to Australian Hiker, your online hiking resource. We're your hosts, Tim and Jill Savage.
This is episode 124 of the Australian Hiker podcast. In this week's episode, we have something slightly different for you as we interview Mickey and Michelle about their upcoming journey on the Te Araroa Trail in New Zealand. This is one of the world's premier long-distance hiking trails, starting at the top of the North Island and finishing at the bottom of the South Island for a distance around 3,000 kilometres. In itself, this is a big trip that presents many challenges and will take a number of months to complete. But if that wasn't enough, they have a few other complications to make this trip more difficult for themselves. Even though Michelle is only 29, she suffers from osteoporosis, and in addition, they are both musicians, and deciding that they didn't want to have such a long period away from music, they'll be doing a series of concerts along the way as a means of funding their trip and to help raise awareness of osteoporosis, which affects 1 in 3 women and 1 in 5 men over the age of 50. So grab a seat and strap yourself in. Before we talk to Mickey and Michelle about their upcoming journey, I just want to provide a brief overview of the Te Araroa Trail and excuse my pronunciation of the Maori language. I'm sure I probably haven't got it right. The Te Araroa Trail in New Zealand is a continuous 3,000 kilometre track from Cape Reinga in the North Island to Bluff at the bottom of the South Island. It was officially opened on the 3rd of December 2011, bringing together a series of sections that had been progressively released since the formation of the New Zealand Walkways Commission in 1975. Te Araroa is the ultimate 5-month New Zealand hiking experience, connecting settlements, townships and cities. It's a corridor that encourages social and economic transactions for Maori stays and other cultural experiences. The track corridor showcases a wide variety of New Zealand experiences, natural, cultural and historic, and it's very similar, I suppose, in some respects to the Appalachian Trail in that it does pass through towns, does include road sections. It's not a completely wilderness experience, and it probably would be very difficult to try and track the entire length of New Zealand and actually do that. So if you've ever wanted to go through and have a good look at New Zealand, this is probably the opportunity to do it. So now that we have provided a brief overview of the Te Araroa Trail, let's talk to Mickey and Michelle, who are just about to start their journey. So I'd like to welcome Mickey and Michelle to the Australian Hiker podcast. Thanks very much for taking the time to talk to us.
Hello. Thanks.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Good start.
Okay. So before we talk about your upcoming journey, give us a bit of a background on your hiking experience. I believe that you've both done some long-distance trails in the past.
Yeah, we have. I suppose the biggest one I've done is the Australian Alps walking track. I'm guessing you're familiar with that one.
Yeah, that's actually on my list for next year.
You're going to hike it next year?
Cool.
I am, yeah. It'll be towards the end of the year as once the bulk of the snow is gone. It'll still be some snow around.
Yeah,
So.
that's a good time. That was my first long-distance hike back at the end of 2017. And, yeah, I just loved it. I just fell in love with long-distance hiking and just the mindset that you get in, too, when you're doing something. That one took me 6 weeks to do. And, yeah. But when hiking for me started probably when I was 23, my dad is an avid hiker and he took me to the Grampians and we did a couple of hikes around there and I just fell in love with it. And I think even it was still that year actually we went up to Mount Feathertop, which was my first alpine experience. And, yeah, that was just blew my mind, really. And it was there, I suppose, that I was really interested in doing the Australian Alps walking track. And yeah, it took a few years. I think it was about 3 years later that I ended up doing that one.
So was that the longest trail you'd done at that stage?
Yes. Actually, before I did the Australian Alps walking track, the longest hike I'd done was a couple of days. Well, actually, no, when I decided to do it, I'd only done a couple of days. But then when I confirmed that that's what I wanted to do, I did a week's hike in order to test gear and see how I went and that kind of stuff.
I was going to say, you possibly couldn't have picked a logistically more difficult one to do as your first long-distance trail.
I realised that afterwards because Mickey and I went and did the Lara Pinta, I think about a year after that.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh, well, this is a bit easier. It's 2 weeks and there's places to put your food drops and that kind of stuff.
3 food drops.
Yeah, rather than a week's food drop and having to drive. I drove 20 hours for the Australian Alps Walking Track in order to do all the food drops and then came back and did the hike. And, yeah, you're right. Logistically, that one was crazy. But I learnt a lot.
Oh, yeah, I was going to say you definitely would, and I think a lot of the tracks you do from there on will probably be much, much easier.
That's what I found. Hit the nail on the head.
All right, so what about you, Mickey? What's your background?
Well, I was a total newbie, and when Michelle was doing the Australian Alps Walking Track, her hiking buddy pulled out for the last 200 Ks, and I got quite a random phone call to come and join, which I took up, and I'd never been on an overnight hike at the time, so I too have suffered a baptism of fire and blisters, and but I fell head over heels, and absolutely loved it, and then since then we've done another 200 kilometres of the Australian Alps, the middle one from Thredbo to Hotham.
Yep.
And I've still got to tick off the final 200 Ks, but we'll get there sometime.
I actually did the section from Kiandra to Canberra or Thawa over Easter because I just wanted a bit of a taster and just to see what it was like. And I think I'm looking forward to doing it next year. So I think it looks like a really good track. All right. So from that, it sounds like you've sort of both developed the long distance hiking bug, but given your past experiences, how did you decide to do an adventure the size of the Te Araroa?
Okay, I suppose that's me. When I finished the Australian Alps Walking Track, I didn't really want to finish it. I wanted to walk back the other way. So apparently 6 weeks wasn't quite enough. So I suppose from then on, I've just been looking for something bigger. And of course, there are ones in Australia and that kind of thing. But I liked, as you were sort of saying before, the Australian Alps you've got to do a lot of preparation for it. And so I like the idea of some of these longer trails, say, like in America, like the Pacific, the Appalachian Trail and I think Pacific Crest Trail, where you don't have to do food drops particularly. You pick up, go to supermarkets along the way, or you post to yourself in the future and that kind of stuff. So, and then I found out, that right very close to us, just across the pond in New Zealand, there was this 6-month or 3,000-kilometre hike. And, it just kind of went from there.
So now just giving the other thing, I suppose, with this as well, you two, apart from actually doing the hike itself, that's one difficulty. You've also decided to give yourself a couple of other extra difficulties as well. So you're both musicians, I believe. So what's the musical aspect of your trip?
Why did that happen?
Well, so it was Michelle who spearheaded the Te Araroa. Te Araroa? Am I saying it right? That's actually one of our list objectives, is to learn how to say it properly.
That's how I pronounce it, but I'm sure if you get to New Zealand, they're going to talk about it a totally different version. So we can say it's the Australian version.
Yeah, true. There's one YouTube video that we found of someone pronouncing it, but it's quite garbled, so that's the best we've got. But thanks. Well, for this interview, I'll be saying Te Araroa then.
Yep.
It was Michelle's idea, and I was less enthused by a 6-month hike because I didn't want to give up music for that long. So I was considering maybe joining her for half of it and doing 3 months.
Yeah, okay. What happened is that so we were looking at, I was going to hike the full thing and Mickey was going to join about halfway through and maybe do the South Island and do 3 months of it. And then he was away on a music camp and I was doing a snow hike by myself. And, that was really lovely. It was going really well. But I woke up at about 2 a.m. and I was extremely cold, sitting on an ice block. And I sort of had this thought, that his main concern with the TA was not playing music for that long. So what if we were to just bring our instruments? Maybe I could convince him to come on this 6-month hike.
And it worked.
Now, I think that's probably a bit easier for you, Mickey. I believe you're let me get this right, you're a jazz fiddleist or violinist, is that right?
Yeah. So it weighs a healthy 300 grams, maybe.
It weighs a couple of kilos in its case.
Yeah.
I'm a harpist, and although I have a very awesome travel harp, which is this Scottish starfish harp, the actual harp weighs about 8.5 kilos, but once you put it in its case, its flight case, it weighs about 20 kilos.
Yeah, no, not really something you want to carry around if you can avoid that.
Yeah, so Michelle will be carrying the harp, and I'm carrying all of our food and gear.
I was going to say the harp would probably be about maximum I'd want to carry. So
it's my maximum, but it's a really awkward shape. So yes, that was the first issue that we came up with. This seemed like a really fun idea, this walking tour. I've heard of people, doing kind of troubadour sort of walking tours before, but maybe they didn't have as ridiculous instruments. Or I've actually heard of someone doing like a bike tour and putting sort of wheeling their instruments along.
Yeah, in the folk communities, you often hear of some alternative tour transports. I've heard of a guy who's solo. I mean, his main objective for touring around Europe was to emit no carbon emissions.
Oh, that's awesome.
And so he toured by rowboat the entire around the Mediterranean.
I have heard of a couple. There's been some couple over the last few years. I was listening to one of the English podcasts just recently, and there was a guy who he did it without taking any money with him, and he was raising money purely by busking. And he said, he started. I think he was actually playing the violin as well, and I think he got lessons 6 months in advance. And he said he thinks that people were paying him to stop playing. and he did.
Yeah, that's our business model that we're.
So, and I think he'd actually based that on something that a famous musician had done 10, 20, 30 years ago. So, and he only spent what he earned. So he either ate exceptionally well or he ate fairly poorly. So what's the idea? I'm assuming you're not going to be carrying a 20 odd kilo harp with you. You're going to somehow handle the musical instruments some other way, because I can't imagine, even if you could carry them, it's not going to be particularly good for the instruments.
You are correct.
Ding ding.
So the man who made my violin this year, his name is Paul Davies. He just lives around the corner, and he's a really lovely, I can probably say on air, eccentric,
down to earth.
Let's say down to earth luthier. And when we told him about the upcoming trip, he got really excited, and he actually offered to pay to have our instruments couriered from gig to gig. So we're currently in the process of designing an elaborate spreadsheet for him, and so he'll be in charge of that, and we'll just be walking from venue to venue, and with slightly rusty fingers, but we plan on getting to each venue a couple of days beforehand and doing some hardcore practice to get back in the performance zone.
All right, so that's the musical side of things. Now, the other difficulty, I suppose, with this walk as well, Michelle, I believe you have osteoporosis.
Yeah, I do. I'm 29 now, and I found out when I was 24 that that's something I have. Although technically at the moment I now have osteopenia, which is it's the same kind of thing but not as bad. It means that on the chart that they give you, you go from the red into the yellow, and that's better colour.
But ideally you're in the green.
Yeah, it's like traffic lights. Yeah, so I do. It's one of the reasons, I suppose, that besides, my dad being really into hiking and that, it's weight-bearing exercises is really good for osteoporosis. And so prioritizing my fitness has become something that's been on my mind since I was 24. So sort of for like the last 5 years. And hiking is really good for it. You have to, although you have to make sure that you keep your weight up, because losing weight is not so good for osteoporosis.
Is that because you lose a lot of muscle mass? Is that the reason?
Yeah.
Or is it?
Well, I think I guess I don't actually know 100%. I just know, that low weight is not particularly good for osteoporosis. So yeah, hiking is good, but as long as you're healthy while you're doing it and making sure that you're getting enough energy from your food and that kind of thing to fuel what it is that you're doing.
Okay, so now as far as hiking is concerned, is walking a good exercise for dealing with osteoporosis?
Yeah, walking is good. It's so the best exercises for osteoporosis are weight-bearing exercise and impact, which hiking fits into that.
Depending on your style.
Depending on your style.
Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, it's definitely it's a tick. You know, things like swimming and cycling are not so. They're fine. They're good for your fitness and that kind of stuff, but they're not going to build bone in the same way as hiking or doing lots of jumping.
I must admit, I managed to just partly destroy one of my discs on my back a number of years ago, and providing I keep myself fit and I keep a strong core, I'm fine. If I ever let myself get to a fairly poor fitness level, I know about it. So it forces me into being fit.
Yeah, it's sort of it feels a little bit like that too, actually. It's something I'm aware of and that I need to think about. Besides doing, we go on lots of hikes and that kind of thing, but also we do exercise every 2 to 3 days, lots of jumping exercises, running down to the park and that kind of thing to help build bone density, as well as keeping our diet in check, eating lots of calcium and taking vitamin D tablets and that kind of thing.
I must admit, I had a fairly extensive set of medical tests done before my hike last year on the Bibbulmun track, and I discovered that I had a vitamin D deficiency, which is not so uncommon, particularly in Australia with middle of winter where you're not getting much sun exposure. But given the amount of time I do spend out in the sun, it did surprise me. So
look, I'm not a doctor, but vitamin D is interesting. It doesn't. I think it only sort of hangs around in your body for kind of like 3 months. I think my doctor told me. So it's not enough to get you through winter, your exposure in summer and that kind of thing. Yeah. So I take vitamin D tablets. I generally take them all the time, but much more diligent in winter.
I must admit, I've gotten to the stage now, particularly on the long hikes, that I will actually take a multivitamin every morning, just to get over that. It's sort of, as I said, even though it's normally my hands and my face, and really, I suppose because I'm so covered up, it tends to be my hands. Yeah. So, I'm not actually picking up a lot of direct sunlight in most cases.
We wear a lot of sunscreen. We are both very white.
Yep.
Freckles. Mm-hmm. We should be somewhere north and cold. We shouldn't be here. So we cover up all the time, and so exactly. You don't actually get that vitamin D exposure from your pinky. It's showing.
All right. So now I suppose looking at we've talked about the music, we've talked about the osteoporosis, and I suppose putting them together, you are going to be playing as you go, as you mentioned, and you've said that you've got a schedule. So do you know where you're playing along the trip, or at least in theory, do you know where you're playing?
We do.
Honestly, the schedule is still coming together, but we've got a pretty darn good idea. So in general, the North Island of New Zealand is much more populated, and I think more, consistently populated. So it seems like there's a lot more walking from town to town, whereas the South Island is more isolated. So the majority of our gigs will be in the North Island, and maybe one of the things that we're really excited about, I suppose, is playing in the smaller towns and communities along the way, because we're trying to play as close to the trail as possible. Like, we're not going to go to Auckland Stadium if Auckland was a bad choice because we walked straight through it. But we are excited. There's a lot of variety, I suppose, in our performances. So some of them will be house concerts, so playing in people's living rooms, whereas some of them will be like community halls and like proper concert halls, essentially all over the North Island, whereas the South Island is a lot sparsely populated.
Yeah.
And we've what's exciting though, we just got accepted into Fire Flat Folk Festival, which is the South Island's biggest folk festival over New Year's. So and that's in Dunedin, which is nowhere near the trail at all. So we'll be taking, I think we've decided on 21 days off from the hike, and we'll be renting a car and driving down there to play. And that means we can go to Christchurch as well, which is also quite far away from the trail. And I've actually toured New Zealand before with another band, and we loved Christchurch and we really loved Dunedin. So we'll sort of take a 3-week sojourn to do some more traditional van-based touring.
Okay. Now, you guys are professional musicians, or when I say professional musicians, you teach and you play, I believe. So now, in relation to what you're doing in New Zealand, you obviously need to fund what you're doing, but I think you're also promoting and helping out from an osteoporosis point of view as well.
Yeah, we are. We're not doing this tour to make money, I suppose. In that walking on foot is probably not the best way.
No, touring's hard enough as it is.
Yeah. This is definitely for the love of it and just because we want to, I would say. But yeah, another aspect of it is raising money for and awareness for osteoporosis, which is something that, obviously is very personal to me. And I'd really like to get the word out there because this is a silent disease, which means that there's no symptoms until you break a bone. And even then, so many people are going untreated because they don't get a DEXA scan, which shows your actual bone density. So it can be caught really late in life where there are drugs and things you can do about it. But if it was caught earlier, like it was for me, there's lots of exercise and food-related things that you can do about it, which is great.
I must admit, you tend to think about osteoporosis being an old person's disease, and particularly older women, I think, as well. But
absolutely. It can, men can get osteoporosis, and younger people too. And it seems like it's just not caught very early. There's not screening tests for it. I think if you're 70, it's subsidized.
Yeah.
Yeah, and all the anytime we're looking at information to do with it or pamphlets or websites or things, that of course the cover has an 80-year-old person on it.
Yeah.
Which is fine. It's just we're hoping to spread some sort of general awareness for osteoporosis. Yeah. Risk factors in younger people. Factors.
Yeah, exactly.
And I suppose as far as money goes, I guess leading on from that, the sort of scarcity of information and research on osteoporosis in younger people led us to contact Peter Ebling, I should say Dr. Peter Ebling, who is, I think I need your help on this one.
He's the head of medicine, I believe, at Monash University and an expert in osteoporosis and bones.
And, we spoke to him and he was very lovely and he was very supportive of us, and he sort of helped word us up on what we can actually tell people as non-doctors. Because obviously we're not going to go recommending someone with severe osteoporosis to eat more, cheese or something. But he's been really lovely, and we were particularly we wanted to somehow be able to give back or contribute, and so we'll be donating at the moment we're sitting on 20% of our merch sales through the tour, and we'll also be raising money to his osteoporosis research.
All right, that's pretty good. I'll go through and put a link to that on the show notes as well. So
thank you.
Hopefully we can help out on that side of things as well. All right, so let's look at the trip itself now. Tell us a bit about the planning process for this trip.
Wow.
and who's doing it?
Okay, so it's interesting.
Picture when the detective has figured out the serial killer's motives, and they've got that red string from room to room to newspaper clipping.
Yes, except it's all virtual. It's all on our computers, I would say. there was a spreadsheet. One of the biggest issues, obviously, at the start, and still is maybe, is knowing where we will be at what time so that we can actually lock in a gig and know that we will reach that gig at a certain time and not miss it by a couple of days or something like that. So, yeah, we had to write up the whole of the trip and, realistically know where we were going to be so that we could ask venues for, certain dates and that kind of thing.
But then on the other side of missing a gig, the same challenge applies to getting there too early because, suddenly we figured out we're ahead of schedule and then we have to stay in town for, 12 days or something practicing and spending money on accommodation or food or something.
I guess we won't quite know until we actually do it.
Yeah, we're starting to feel like we know the trail pretty well because we've been staring at this map for so long.
Yeah.
I guess we've been preparing for just over a year now.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think we started October last year.
October last year we decided to do it and then it's just sort of snowballed.
So I'd actually say that most of our preparation has been for the music side of it. It's been organising gigs, knowing where we'll be when, and then me and Mickey didn't have an album. So we've actually just been recording that this week.
We actually finished today, this morning. And whoa, what a ride.
So yeah, whereas we're a part of these TA groups online.
TA meaning Te Araroa.
Sorry, yes.
Yep.
On Facebook. And we're there sort of throwing all these emails, asking questions to other hikers saying, what are you going to do here on the hike and what are you thinking about this gear and all that kind of stuff. Me and Mickey are in like, what are we going to, what track are we going to put where on our album?
What chord should go next?
Yeah, we're just in this whole different headspace at the moment. It's very much in the music side of it.
Yeah, so especially like planning your own tour in this sort of grassroots fashion is quite difficult. But I think with our skill set, we can, and with the time that we've had available, we've generally been able to afford to indulge in more of the music side of planning because, like, particularly Michelle is a whiz with a map, and like, I suppose planning and logistics is what I'm after.
He's trying to say that I'm the more obsessive of the two of us.
There's always got to be one, so.
Whereas I'm much more of a, yeah, sure, whatever type of hiker. And I, not having never hiked in New Zealand, I can say I'm 100% confident in Michelle's ability to plan on the fly. And, I think we've had some situations in the past where, she's just been very much like looking at the map and our itinerary and going, oh, if we did half of next day's walking as well, we'd get out X quicker and we'd be in a hotel by tomorrow night or something, or there's a huge rainstorm on the way, whereas I'm the oblivious but enthusiastic companion.
Just on the logistics side of things, how long is it going to take you to do the trip overall? What's the planned time frame?
Okay, at the moment we start at the very end of September and we go all the way through to about mid-April.
Yep.
That includes that sort of 20 to 27 days off around Christmas and New Year's and all of our gigs. So we have to take off, obviously, the day for a gig, but we have to take off at least the day before it as well. So I suppose gigs are kind of our rest days where we do something else.
Well, we at least rest our feet, but not our brains.
Yeah, something like that.
No, that's fair enough. I think if you particularly your trip that sort of length, you've got to have rest days somewhere, and if
exactly.
You're doing something you enjoy, and you're using at least the hands and the brain rather than the legs.
Smaller muscles. Yeah.
All right. So I know this is going to vary, but do you have an average distance that you're planning on covering each day?
Yeah. I guess we kind of know what we like to cover. I would say probably 20 kilometers. We're very happy to do less than that.
Yeah.
we've also done more than that. Of course, it really depends on terrain. And I would say that me and Mickey have done a lot of up and down. Like our hikes, like the Australian Alps walking track has been lots of elevation in them. So we're quite used to doing less kilometers. So I'm curious to see how we go with certain flatter sections of TA.
I think you'll pick up. You'll certainly pick up a bit of speed. I suppose coming back to you're saying you've done the Larapenta, it's like I don't know which way. Where did you start on the Larapinta? Which
At
mountain?
Masunda.
We went west to east.
Yeah, so I think the last 2 days of Larapinta, where you're pretty much on relatively flat ground, you tend to get through quite a bit of distance, whereas the first few days it's a bit harder.
Yeah, I think we were almost clearing 30.
We could taste that ice cream when we were.
Yeah, no. All right. Now, are you going to be tenting it for most of the trip, or are you doing a combination of tent and sleeping in people's houses and hotels?
I think the overwhelming majority will be in our tent. We have a really soft spot for huts. The huts on the Australian Alps walking track are just, they were like a big draw card for me after the very first one. I just fell in love with them.
Yeah.
So
we'll be hanging out in the huts. But having said that, I still like spending the night in the tent.
Yeah. We've got a Mont tent that's very lovely.
And it's very luxurious. It's a 3-person tent.
Yeah.
That's always pretty good.
Uh-huh.
And then sure, there might be some hotels, but like I said before, I think a lot of, say, the house concerts that we'll be running have offered to put us up in a place.
Yeah.
And, I think I can confidently say as musicians, staying at someone's house after a performance is, infinitely better than going back to just, a stale hotel room. And I think we're really excited about the sort of cultural exchange, I suppose, of this trip, and, the holistic nature of combining, music, hiking, and this sort of health awareness thing. Yeah, I think it sort of fits into our mission statement, I suppose, to be staying with locals whenever possible.
So something just came to mind just with what we've been talking about. So essentially you're doing a musical tour, and rather than driving, you're walking from venue to venue.
That's it.
Yeah, you got it.
All right. Now, what about resupply? So food-wise, how many days of food do you think you're going to be carrying, or what's the resupply strategy?
Okay, so we've carried 8 days before. That's heavy.
Yeah, no,
we can do 8 days, but it is,
Yeah, that's enough.
That's I'm carrying 20 kilos at that point, kind of thing, and less is always nicer. So I guess we'll be aiming for maybe 7 days at the most. But there's amazing trail notes for this hike, and they show all the resupply options, and most of the time it looks like it's it's around 7 days at the most, or less than that. When you get into the South Island, there are some stretches that are more like 10 days, and you post to a location. When you're in the end of the North Island at Wellington, you actually set up some parcels for yourself, and you post to yourself in the future.
Yeah.
I guess that's technically kind of a food drop, but not nearly as much organising.
No, I must admit, I'm used to doing mail resupplies. As this episode goes to air, I would have hopefully finished my human hovel track trip, and that involved doing a box drop to an accommodation site, and then hide a barrel of food in the middle of the bush, which is what you would have been used to on the Australian Alps walking track. So, it's a bit of a luxury when you can go to a post office and say, "Is my box here?" You've already mentioned your musical instrument maker, Mickey, in relation to helping out. But do you have any other sponsors or family and friends that are helping out on the trail for this journey?
We're afraid that's it.
Well, we don't. We don't have any other sponsors. We have some family. People put their hands up just to come over and catch up with us.
Yeah, I think my mum and my sister are going to come over for Christmas.
Yeah.
And maybe some of Michelle's family.
Yeah.
We're just starting to talk about that now. So, in Christmas we'll be in Dunedin, and when I say Dunedin, I obviously mean Wellington.
Yeah.
And I think we'll be ready for a couple of days off to hang out. But no, I guess the invitation is open to all of your listeners. Come along.
Come for a hike. We've had some really good chats with Mark, who's the chief executive of TA.
Oh, that's a great point.
He's been very helpful and very supportive of the idea, and even helped us get a gig near Wanaka.
Let's get on to talking gear. So while you're both hikers, would you class yourself as gearheads, or you just tend to use what's at hand?
In some ways, I think we can be very specific, and then on the other hand, we can definitely make do.
Not worry. Yeah. So examples. Our packs are iron packs. Have you come across those?
I haven't used them, but I'm aware of them. And you've
they're great.
Yep. Well, they're a New Zealand company. I've forgotten his name. Is it Tim? I just call him Mr. Arn. Couple who make these balance packs. And when I was going to do the Australian Alps walking track, it was, I was apprehensive, I suppose. I didn't quite know how my spine would take it, having osteoporosis. And I thought that the balance packs are probably a really good idea for me because it could load the weight sort of straight down and more onto my hips rather than my back sort of taking so much of the load. And yeah, well, I've sort of fell in love with those packs, and Mickey ended up getting one too.
I love it. One of the best things is just so you've got these. I don't know what we've been calling them, boob packs.
I don't think they're officially called boob packs, but
anyway,
the balance packs at the front.
There's 2 balance pouches hanging above your chest, but you can put your water bottle in them, and
your food snacks.
So you can actually
reach things.
You can drink while walking, which is really nice, and it totally trumps a camel pack because you can actually see how much water's left in your bottle.
Yeah, that's nice too.
We love them.
But the thing is that a lot of people we've come across not everyone is familiar with the iron packs, and you get a few funny looks.
Oh, they look really dorky.
Especially when we're both wearing them.
It's not unusual. I think if you tend to get one pair of a couple using them, the other one will often tend to end up doing it as well. So
we have a lot of the same gear. It's pretty embarrassing.
Yeah. But then on the flip side, all of our clothes just come from Vinnie's, and we wear them until they're rags, and then
buy another $5 shirt.
And you're saying that 8 days worth of food and 20 weighing 20 kilos is not too bad. I mean, it's a lot of weight, but I mean, certainly you're not. I've seen people carrying 34 kilos in the same sort of situation. So, and. In relation to food, I mean, have you guys, what do you tend to eat when you're going on these long distance hikes? Is it everything and anything, or you're pretty specific on what you eat?
Very specific. Okay, so have you heard of Extreme Gourmet?
I haven't actually.
A book for you to check out. It's by Sonia Malsima, and she's from New South Wales, and she did this. I guess crowdfunding campaign to make this book, I don't know, a couple of years ago now, and it's high energy, lightweight recipes for the outdoor enthusiast.
Yeah, right. So all of her recipes are based on, the energy consumption you'll need for extreme outdoor activities. And it's become a bit of our food Bible.
Yes.
And there's these great meals in there. There's there's spag bowl. The other parameter of the book is that all of the ingredients can be found in your average supermarket, and they will all freeze dried. No, dehydrated.
Yeah.
Some freeze-dried.
So there's spag bowl. There's pizza. Yeah. There's dumplings. It's just great, and we've definitely sort of snubbed our noses at some of the people eating backcountry.
Which can be really nice.
Oh, yeah, which can be great. But, yeah, we've definitely... Oh, some people, eating, cold nuts for dinner, and then they're looking up at us as we're, mixing our tuna mornay. They look a bit jealous.
Yeah. So, look, the thing is that we can't... And we don't want to prepare all of our food like we have for other hikes. But I think that with the knowledge from this book, I think we'll be able to make up some of the recipes when we walk into a supermarket and that kind of thing. It's also... It's given me the confidence to know the right kind of energy that I need for hiking, and which is a lot more than my everyday life. So we both feel quite comfortable with knowing how much we eat, and therefore not losing weight on a hike.
Yeah, and actually that raises a point there. I mean, with the trips that you've both done, typically males will strip the weight off quite quickly, whereas females, they'll lose some weight or maintain weight, but they don't tend to lose a huge amount. Have you found that's the case on the hikes that you've done, or you're both losing or both gaining or both staying stable with your weight?
I think you're spot on.
Yeah, so I generally stay stable. I it moves around. The weight will go from my arms into my legs.
Yeah,
so I'll
yeah.
feel different. But if I stand on the scales at the end, I'm the same if I'm eating well, this kind of food. Mickey usually loses a little bit.
Yeah, I've been stockpiling some weight over the last couple of weeks. I think I lost 2 kilos in 2 weeks on the Australian Alps, but I had some to burn then, and I think now I'm a bit slimmer. So we'll see. Yeah, I just plan on pigging out whenever we get to a town.
Yeah, I found that we really need on the off days to eat a lot of food when we're in towns.
Yeah, it's not hard. I mean, I know on my biggest days I burn about 8,500 calories, and there's just no way you can carry that sort of food on a trail. You know you're gonna drop it, or in Michelle's case, you're toning up, which is pretty common for females on the longer trails.
Yeah.
So, in relation to your osteoporosis, how do you see the trip going? I mean, are you pretty confident you're going to finish the trip, or have you got any strategies for injuries, or if you find that look you're getting 6 weeks in or 10 weeks in and it's just not going to work? How have you worked that one?
Good questions. I think I've had 2 stress fractures in my foot from hiking. One of them was on the Australian Alps walking track, but it wasn't particularly bad. And I actually took some days off and I managed to continue and it was okay. But another one, a stress fracture that I had, the hike finished and then I realized that I had the stress fracture. But I wouldn't have been able to continue then. So it's, breaking something, I guess, is definitely on my mind. From past experiences, I'd like to say that I've learnt things from them. Firstly, how to hike. So I'm very careful with the way that I walk, I would say. For example, I don't rock hop because that's something that will give me a stress fracture, which is what happened the first time I had one. Because you've got that extra weight on your back and that, just your foot gets fatigued and, it's easy for me, I suppose, to get a stress fracture. I don't know. The thing is, what on the Australian Alps, at first I was so concerned about finishing that hike and I was so worried about my foot getting another stress fracture, but in the end it was actually my knee that went. Really sore knee, it hurt when I bent my knee and that kind of stuff, and I just sort of hobbled along and kind of continued the whole way. I think I came to terms with not finishing that hike, and then in the end I actually did end up finishing it. So we're okay with not finishing, I suppose.
Yeah, it's definitely
one day at a time. Like we've planned this huge thing, but we're aware that it won't go to plan.
And there'll be weather and we're mentally prepared to. It's not in our aesthetic to hike every step of the way. Like if we've got a gig approaching and we've been kept in by rain for the last 3 days or something, we're fully prepared to hitch a couple of days so that we can keep our performance commitments. Yeah.
Now, from the physical to the mental, what sort of mechanisms do you have as a couple that you don't wake up and feel like you're about to stab the other person in the tent because they've been snoring all night or they've been keeping you awake? How do you tend to find that goes on the longer trips?
Well, we keep the knives outside the tent. I don't know. We haven't had an issue yet. With that yet.
Fortunately, I'm really funny. So I
think we found an issue.
Actually, I think maybe our unconscious plan is that we tend to sleep in a lot.
Yeah.
And it's not uncommon for us to commence our hike at 11 or 12.
AM.
Yeah. So I actually, in all fairness, I suppose prioritizing sleep is a big one. Mm-hmm. Not overexerting ourselves, I think, because it's such a long distance. So limiting, not essentially limiting ourselves to 20 Ks, but like leaving it around there, we don't have these enormous plans to get from Auckland to Christchurch in 2 days.
Yeah.
And so I think there's less pressure on us.
Stress levels, yeah. And I suppose the music and having that time off the hike and that kind of thing, I think will be really good for our mental health too. Like I really love the headspace I get into while hiking, but I've done a 6-week hike. I haven't done a 6-month hike. So I think it'd be really nice to have that time away from the hike.
And a lot of... Oh, sorry, go.
I was just going to say to be in a different mental state.
We have seen, there's this like awesome Facebook group for TA walkers. And some people have been posting, you know, like, oh no, I've just finished the hike and I'm back at my office job and I hate myself, or like, I just want to go again, or I can't sit at a desk for another day. And I think this is potentially the start of us sort of integrating hiking and work on a more regular basis.
Yeah.
And so it definitely has more of a holiday aspect, or I don't know if you call hiking a holiday. It definitely has more of like an adventure outside the norm aspect to it right now, but in the future it might be more of a combined activity.
Yeah, I found that with the longest trip I've done has been 5 weeks, and pretty much that was all by myself, barring about 9 hours worth. And
wow. Where was that?
That was on the Bibbulmun track, and right. I didn't come across a lot of people until I started getting into towards Perth. So as I said, talking to people, it would have been probably around about 9 hours over 5 weeks, and I certainly came away from having thought through the problems of the world, and solo hiking tends to be a very different beast. You do come away, whether it's solo or as a group, you come away from the long trips really thinking about where you're heading and what you're doing, and what do you want to be doing.
Yeah, totally.
There's so much clarity when you go out of your normal day.
What parts of the trip are you most looking forward to? So music aside, but in relation to, is it scenery? Is it people? What's the things you can't wait to see or do?
I think dehydrated food.
He just loves it.
Oh.
Okay. It's probably a combination of people and scenery. I'm very excited about. There's about, I think, a month and a half in the South Island that we don't have any gigs, and it's gonna be quite rural and very isolated compared to what we will have done in the North Island. And I do love that kind of hiking. So I'm excited about that. But I guess I'm equally excited about, coming to towns and having that sort of cultural exchange experience that I haven't had on many hikes before, because I tend to pick the more isolated ones.
Yeah.
We're also excited for like the trail life.
Yeah.
Like I mentioned this Facebook group earlier, but you're already starting to make these online friends, and it's kind of fun to have meet them in real life, and then be removed from like the sort of online element, and to just hear stories about the people who are ahead of you, or the people who are going the opposite way. They say, oh, in a couple of days you'll run into this person, and then you finally meet them, and it's just lovely.
Yeah.
And we're hoping they'll come to some of our gigs.
Yeah, it's always fun.
Okay. So I suppose I just want, as one final thing, what final comment would you like to make to anyone contemplating undertaking a hike on the Te Araroa?
So I would thoroughly recommend checking out the TA website.
TA Trust.
TA Trust. So they've got some awesome infrastructure set in place, and the hike's been going since 2011, and since then they've really taken care of it, and every year they're updating it to make it safer. The trail angels, the people who are open to having you come and shower at their place if you can't handle it, or if you need a night off, or if you've run out of food, they're so supportive and really warm and friendly, and I would thoroughly recommend checking that out.
Okay, so thank you very much for your time, and good luck on your upcoming trip.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Okay, so that was Mickey and Michelle talking about their upcoming trip, which they start on the 1st of October on the Te Araroa in New Zealand. Now, as we said at the start of this episode and throughout when we talked to them, they really are doing something a bit out of the ordinary, I suppose. So they're not just doing a hike because they enjoy it, or they're doing it for a couple of reasons. One is to raise awareness of osteoporosis, particularly in younger people. And the other thing, just to complicate the matter, was they're doing this as musicians. So they're having to plan in such a way that they need to know where they are at any given point in time so they can go through and book their venues in advance. So it really means that they're going to have to actually have a schedule and stick to that schedule, or if things go horribly wrong, they're going to have enough notice to go through and change it.
Yeah, that's a really interesting thing. I think you meant that they need to know where they're going to be, because hopefully they'd know where they are.
We hope so. We hope so.
But, I guess the more we do of this, the more I really enjoy hearing the stories of people and why they get out there and do something that's a little bit different. And, in this case, we've got, two interesting reasons and two interesting ways in which they're doing what they're doing. So, it's just fantastic. And I think it's a great motivation and great inspiration for people. So
we, as I said, they're starting their walk on the 1st of October, which is not that far away. We've gone through on the show notes and put a series of links to both the Te Araroa Trail for those people that are interested in finding out more about this long-distance trail in New Zealand. We've also gone through and put links to Mickey and Michelle's website, including to their music. They are musicians. This is what they do for a living. I've got a fairly eclectic sort of taste in music, and I found that in listening to the songs which they've got on their website, I actually enjoy quite a lot of them.
Yeah.
It is, when you combine the harp and a jazz violin, it's quite interesting sort of music, and there's a couple of particular pieces there that I do like. So I'm more than likely going to go through and buy the album because I really do enjoy it. So have a listen to the music on the website. Go through and follow along with Mickey and Michelle. Their Facebook and Instagram page, which I'll be posting, will be available as well, and their website providing a bit of background to what they're doing, including a link once they start walking to donate to osteoporosis research.
I think this is a really interesting one because, there are so many ways in which you can follow and support what they're doing, whether it's about the music, whether it's about the osteoporosis cause that they're raising money for, whether it's just following on their journey. So, there's something in there for everyone, I think.
So we'll be going through and catching up with them over the coming months. They're going to be doing this for many months. So probably just around the Christmas period, we'll try and catch up with them and see how their trip's going. Okay, that's all for this week. We hope you've enjoyed this interesting episode. And as I said, if you're keen, follow along with Mickey and Michelle on their website. Next week's episode, we're going to be talking about considerations for choosing equipment to carry on a hike. That's all for me. Bye for now.
And bye from me.